I wasn't snooping. I wasn't hiding behind a door or creeping through the hallway like some cartoon villain. I was just walking upstairs with a basket of laundry, passing by the guest room where my wife, Allison, was talking to her sister on speakerphone. That's it. That's the moment everything changed. That's when the life I thought I had, the marriage, the partnership, the trust, started to unravel right in front of me like a cheap sweater tugged loose at the seam. My name's Jason, and I'm 36. By most accounts, I've lived a quiet, stable life. I run a mid-sized manufacturing business my dad started years ago. Nothing flashy, just steel brackets and hardware. Not the sort of thing that gets you featured in Forbes, but it keeps the lights on. My dad handed it down to me when he retired to Arizona, and over the years, I've grown it into something respectable. We're not mega rich, but we're very comfortable. I married Allison when I was 29 and she was 27. We met through mutual friends at a summer lake party. She had that effortless charm that draws people in. Always the center of attention. Always knowing exactly what to say to make someone feel like they mattered. I was more reserved, the kind of guy who prefers to observe first, speak later. But she made me feel like I could open up. And for a long time, I thought we had a really good thing. We never had kids, though we talked about it. I thought we'd wait until we were a bit more settled, less work stress, maybe move into a bigger place. But she kept pushing it off. Not yet, she'd say. Let's enjoy each other a little longer. I didn't question it much. Honestly, I liked our life. Dinners out, spontaneous weekend getaways, binge-watching crime shows on the couch with takeout. Things didn't change overnight. That's the thing people get wrong about broken relationships. There's no dramatic crash, no explosive argument that ends it all in a single moment. It's more like rust, slow, silent, spreading behind the paint where you can't see it until it's already weakened the entire frame. Looking back, I think the first crack showed up around our 5th anniversary. She started being a little more distant, less affectionate, more critical. Little jabs about my clothes, the way I loaded the dishwasher, the kinds of people I hired at work. Nothing huge, just barbs that left tiny pinpricks in your confidence. When I asked if something was wrong, she always brushed it off. Just tired, just work stress, just in a mood. Eventually, I stopped asking. I thought maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe this was just how long-term relationships went. You settle, you get comfortable, and maybe the spark fades a little. That's normal, right? The thing is, I was happy to make it work. I believed in loyalty, in sticking it out through the dry spells. I figured we'd find our rhythm again. So I kept working hard, trying to be a good husband. I made sure the bills were paid, surprised her with flowers every now and then, booked weekend trips to break the routine. I wasn't perfect, I know that, but I genuinely tried. Meanwhile, Allison got closer and closer to her sister, Rachel. They'd always been tight, but it became intense. Long phone calls late into the night, whispered conversations when I walked into the room, shared glances at family dinners like they were holding on to a secret I wasn't privy to. I chalked it up to typical sister stuff. I didn't have siblings, so I didn't know what that dynamic was supposed to look like. Then came that afternoon, the one with the laundry basket, the casual stroll past the guest room, the words that brought everything to a grinding halt. I heard Allison laugh, light and dismissive. "No, I haven't told him yet," she said. Rachel's voice buzzed faintly from the speaker. "Still? What are you waiting for?" "I don't know," Allison replied. "The right moment, I guess. Maybe after the holidays. Or once we're done with the mortgage refinance. I don't want to make things messy." I froze. My brain couldn't even process what I'd just heard. Divorce? Mortgage refinance? What messy was she referring to? Rachel sighed. "You've been talking about this for months." "I know, but it's complicated. He's not a bad guy. He's just safe. Predictable. I need more." There was a silence. Then Rachel said something that made my stomach twist. "So you're just stringing him along until the paperwork's in your favor?" And Allison, my wife, my partner of nearly 7 years, didn't even deny it. "Basically," she said, "I'm not stupid. I need to be smart about this." I stood there like an idiot, holding a pile of socks and dress shirts, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. Every memory of us, our wedding, our late-night talks, her head on my shoulder during movies, it all felt tainted, like I'd just found out my favorite song had been plagiarized. I didn't say anything. I didn't confront her. Not right away. I just walked back downstairs, sat on the edge of the couch, and stared at the blank TV screen while my thoughts spun in circles. She was planning to leave me. Not just planning, It was already a strategy, and I was just an obstacle. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the fact that she thought I wouldn't see it coming, that I wouldn't protect myself, that she could play this game behind my back, and I'd still be the naive little husband holding the door open while she walked out with half my life. She thought she was being smart. What she didn't know was that I'd been quietly smart for years. And I wasn't just waiting. I was preparing. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake next to her, listening to the sound of her breathing, watching the faint glow of her phone light up the ceiling as she scrolled through Instagram or Pinterest or whatever social media black hole she fell into most nights. I didn't say a word. I didn't give any sign that I knew, because I wasn't ready to play my hand yet. I needed to be patient, calculated, just like she was trying to be. And so began the quietest, most strategic 3 weeks of my life. But that's when things started to get really interesting. For the next few days, I lived a double life. Outwardly, nothing changed. I got up, made coffee, kissed Allison on the cheek, went to work, came home, asked about her day. We watched a couple of episodes of that true crime show she liked, ordered sushi on Friday night like we always did, and even went to brunch with her parents that Sunday. I laughed at her dad's bad jokes. I nodded as her mom gushed over the boutique she wanted to open. I smiled when Allison reached for my hand in front of them. But underneath all of it, I was planning, watching, filing things away. I started by pulling up our bank records. I already handled most of our finances, but now I looked closer. She'd opened a separate checking account 6 months ago. Just a few hundred here and there at first, returns from stores, a freelance gig she'd dabbled in, little bits of cash she probably thought I wouldn't notice. Then, over time, larger deposits. A few thousand from a design job, which didn't align with any of the freelance projects she'd told me about. When I casually asked her what she'd been working on lately, she gave me a vague answer. Just some small stuff, nothing steady yet. Still figuring it out. I smiled, nodded, made a mental note. Then I called my lawyer. His name's Gerald, and he's been with the family for years. He handled my dad's business when he transitioned ownership to me, and I trusted him. We met for lunch at a quiet steakhouse on the edge of town, and I laid it out for him. Not everything, not yet, but enough. She's planning to leave, and I think she's trying to set herself up to walk away with more than she's entitled to. He looked over his glasses and said, "Do you have a prenup?" "No. We married young. I didn't think I needed one." Gerald sighed, then leaned forward. "Then you need to move fast. Quietly. Start isolating assets. Put the business in a trust, restructure your holdings, clean up anything she might try to lay claim to later." I told him I wanted everything airtight, ironclad, bulletproof. I wasn't going to be another guy who got blindsided in court while his ex-wife walked off with the company his dad spent his life building. He nodded. "You're doing the right thing. But this isn't going to be fun." He wasn't wrong. The following week felt like I was dismantling my own life piece by piece. I met with bankers, accountants, estate planners. Quietly moved the business into an irrevocable trust under my name. Shifted certain accounts into structures she couldn't touch. Removed her name from anything that wasn't legally obligated to remain joint. Even started separating my personal and business electronics. Changing passwords, wiping old shared logins, rerouting email notifications to secure backups. All of this happened under the surface, like the silent churn of tectonic plates. And still, at home, I kept up the act. We even hosted a game night with friends. Wine, charcuterie, board games, fake laughs. I watched her sit across from me and smile, and I wondered how long she'd been pretending to. But the breaking point, the moment when all the cracks split wide open, came 3 weeks later, and it was so stupid, so mundane, it almost didn't seem real at first. It started with a fight about laundry. No joke. Laundry. I came home late from work one night, later than usual. We were finalizing a contract with a new supplier, and I'd had to stay behind to review the language before signing. I texted her I'd be home around 9. When I walked through the door, she was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, a movie paused on the screen. "You didn't do the laundry," she said flatly. I blinked. "I told you I'd be home late. I figured I'd do it tomorrow." She stood up, tense. "I needed the dryer for my clothes. I have brunch with my friends tomorrow. I can just throw them in now." She threw her hands up. "That's not the point, Jason. You're so inconsiderate lately." Something about the way she said that word, lately, set something off in me. Like she was laying the groundwork, brick by brick, for some false narrative. that I was the distant one, that I had changed, that she was the victim here. I stayed calm. I texted you. You said okay. She scoffed. You always have an excuse. That night spiraled into a long, exhausting argument. She brought up things I didn't even remember: missed date nights, forgotten errands, passive-aggressive comments I apparently made in passing. I listened for a while, then something in me just shut down. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out the window at our dark backyard while she kept ranting in the living room. That's when she said it. You know, sometimes I feel like I'm already divorced. It was like a cold hand wrapping around my spine. I didn't say anything, just turned around, finished my water, and went upstairs. I didn't sleep. Again, my mind was too loud. That weekend, everything shifted. She started treating me with open disdain, no more pretending. Sarcastic comments, short tempers, refusing to make eye contact during meals, staying out later than usual, saying she was with Maya and the girls, even though Maya texted me to confirm a delivery address for Allison's birthday and mentioned she hadn't seen her in 2 weeks. And then, the ultimate insult, I caught her on the phone again. Not with Rachel this time. This was a new name. Claire. I was walking back from the garage with a wrench in my hand when I heard her out on the patio, back door slightly ajar. He won't suspect a thing, she said. I already got the documents. Just need to time it right. I want to make sure I get the vacation house in the split. My chest tightened. We didn't have a vacation house. Not yet. But I'd mentioned, once, in passing, a listing I saw for a cabin upstate. I'd even printed out the brochure and left it on the counter. We hadn't even discussed buying it yet. But now, she was plotting to stake a claim to something that didn't even exist yet, like she was already visualizing her new life with half of mine in her hands. It made me sick. I walked back inside, quiet as a ghost, set the wrench on the workbench, and went into my office. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a rough patch. This wasn't boredom or restlessness. This was calculated. Cold. She wasn't unsure. She wasn't scared. She was waiting for the next move in her little game. And I was done playing nice. The next morning, I went to Gerald and told him everything. Every word I'd overheard. Every shift in behavior. Every lie. He didn't even look surprised. We'll finalize the last round of asset protections this week, he said. I'll prepare for a potential filing on her part. You'll be ready. I nodded. But I still wasn't ready for what happened next. 3 days later, she filed. She didn't tell me in person. She didn't cry. She didn't even fake a tear. She just left the papers on the kitchen counter and went to stay at Rachel's. No note. No explanation. Just the sterile clang of a betrayal that no longer needed to be hidden. But I stayed quiet. I didn't text her. Didn't call. Didn't rage. I let her move. I let her feel powerful. In control. And then, exactly a week later, I got the call. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk, sorting invoices, when my phone lit up with her name. I stared at it for a long second. Then picked up. Her voice was shaky, breathy, a little panicked. Jason, hey. Hey. I was just looking over some stuff. The accounts. The paperwork. Okay. A pause. Then, quiet and trembling. Why is everything in your name? I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch just long enough. Then I said the words I'd been saving like a dagger behind my back. Because I wasn't just waiting. I was preparing. She didn't say anything at first. Just breathed. And then, the panic started to rise. Jason, what does that mean? What did you do? Why is the business in a trust? Why can't my lawyer access the records for the joint investments? I smiled just slightly. I think you should talk to Gerald. And I hung up. That should have been enough. But Allison wasn't the type to walk away quietly. Not when she realized she was losing. And not when Rachel decided to get involved. Because that's when things really started to spiral out of control. And that's when the revenge stopped being quiet. I thought that would be the moment I felt vindicated. That after all the secrecy, the betrayal, the nights I'd stared at the ceiling wondering how I could have been so blind, that phone call would flip some kind of switch. That hearing her voice crack when she realized she was boxed out, legally and financially, would give me that satisfying Hollywood-style rush. But it didn't. I sat at my desk long after I hung up, the glow of my monitor washing over invoices I couldn't focus on. My office felt too quiet, like the air itself was waiting for me to process what had just happened. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel powerful. I felt hollow. Because even though I had outplayed her, I had also lost something I didn't know I still valued until it was gone. This naive, loyal version of myself who truly believed love was enough. And now, all I had was a silence that no amount of revenge could fill. The days that followed were the darkest of my life. Allison didn't call again. She sent everything through her attorney, who was clearly blindsided. I got a dozen frantic emails over the course of a week, requests for account access, questions about asset movement, accusations of foul play. Gerald handled it all with calm professionalism. Everything I'd done was legal, strategic, and above board. But it didn't stop the chaos that followed. Rachel started showing up at my office. The first time, she marched in like she owned the place. Tight blazer, oversized sunglasses, lips pursed like she was chewing on something sour. "You're a coward," she said before I could even offer a greeting. "Good afternoon to you too, Rachel." You blindsided her. After everything she did for you. I raised an eyebrow. Everything she did. She wasted the best years of her life on your boring little existence. I smiled politely. Is that what she told you? She could have left years ago. She stayed because she felt sorry for you. You're lucky someone like her even gave you the time of day. I leaned against my desk, arms folded. You're right. I am lucky. Because now I know exactly who she is. And I've got the receipts to prove it. Rachel blinked, momentarily thrown off. I walked to the door and opened it. Next time, make an appointment. That didn't stop her from showing up again. And again. Sometimes she came with fake apologies, begging me to reconsider. Other times she came to scream. Once she even brought Allison's mother, who stood awkwardly in the lobby as Rachel ranted like she was leading some sort of protest against corporate betrayal. Gerald advised a restraining order, but I held off. Part of me still believed the storm would pass. That Allison would retreat with whatever dignity she had left and start over. But that was naive Jason thinking. She wasn't done yet. Because when someone like Allison realizes they've lost control, when the spotlight shifts off them, they don't shrink. They escalate. I was about to learn that the hard way. It started with whispers in our social circle. Friends I hadn't heard from in weeks suddenly couldn't make it to plans. A few were contacts sent odd, cryptic messages asking if I was doing okay, or if I needed help. Then came the rumors, quiet ones, but effective, that I'd emotionally abused Allison, that I was secretly seeing someone else, and had cut her off as punishment when she found out, that I'd manipulated the legal system to steal what was rightfully hers. It was disgusting and clever. She never said these things directly, just planted seeds. Hinted. Let people fill in the blanks. And to my surprise, it worked. Even people who knew us, people who'd been to our wedding, our parties, our vacations, somehow gave her the benefit of the doubt. I guess a well-timed tear and a shaky voice go a long way. That was my fault. Not the legal battle. Not the financial maneuvering. But the isolation. One night, I came home to an empty house and stood in the hallway, looking at framed photos of friends I hadn't spoken to in weeks. I picked up one of me and Allison at a beach wedding, smiling under string lights, holding wine glasses, and pretending we had something worth celebrating. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I dropped it. The glass cracked on impact, but the photo didn't tear. Her smile stayed frozen. Eternal. Untouched. I left the broken frame on the hallway table and walked upstairs, exhausted. That night, I opened my laptop and created a new folder on my desktop, Phase 2, because I was done waiting for things to blow over. If the life I had before was gone, fine. Then I'd build something better. But this time, for me, the rebuilding didn't happen overnight. It never does. I started by turning inward, hard reset. No more coasting. No more self-pity. I joined a gym, not a flashy one with juice bars and Instagram lighting. Just a small place near the office, run by a retired Marine named Ken who didn't believe in excuses. I told him I wanted to get in shape. He didn't ask why, just handed me a towel and said, "Show up at 6 a.m. No whining." I did. Every morning. Even when I was sore. Even when I barely slept. It was the only time of day I felt fully in control. And with every drop of sweat, I felt something in me shifting. Recalibrating. Next, I revamped the business. I stopped playing defense and started expanding. New marketing. New client outreach. I promoted a few younger employees who'd been quietly doing great work and let go of a couple of leeches who'd coasted on charm for too long. I got leaner, smarter, faster. And people noticed. Deals started closing faster. Clients complimented the new energy in the company. Even my dad, who rarely said more than keep at it, called one night just to say, "Proud of what you've done, son." I didn't tell him everything. Not yet. But that moment stayed with me. Then came something unexpected. I got a message on LinkedIn from a woman named Evelyn, someone I hadn't seen since college. She'd been in my marketing class, back when I still thought I'd work in advertising. We grabbed coffee one afternoon just to catch up. No expectations. No flirting. But it felt easy. Honest. Like being around someone who remembered you before your life got complicated. We started seeing each other more often. Dinner here, drinks there. She knew about the divorce. Everyone did, but she never pried. She asked how I was doing, not what happened. That alone made her stand out. And for the first time in months, I felt like maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I'd just been surviving in the wrong chapter for too long. 3 months passed. By then, the legal process was nearly over. Gerald had handled everything with precision. Allison's attorney tried every angle: emotional damages, contributions to lifestyle, even some vague claims about emotional duress. None of it stuck. When her lawyer finally saw the full picture, the trust, the records, the financial walls she couldn't scale, it was over. All she got was what the court mandated: a clean split of what little remained jointly held. A modest payout. No stake in the business. No future claim on assets. No spousal support. It hit her hard. Rachel, too. She stopped coming to the office after that. I heard they took a trip to Florida to clear their heads. I stayed quiet. Professional. Measured. Until one last thing happened that changed everything again. A mutual friend, a real one, called me out of the blue. His name was Derek, someone I'd known since high school. He was always neutral, the type who didn't get involved in drama. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," he said, "but I just had lunch with Allison." I froze. And she told me something that didn't sit right. She said she only stayed with you for as long as she did because she wanted the business, and figured if she waited long enough, you'd make a mistake. My chest tightened. She actually said that? She laughed when she said it. Like it was a joke. But it didn't feel like one. I didn't say anything. He hesitated. "Jason, I just thought you should know. Because she's not done. She's planning something else. I could see it in the way she talked about you. She's bitter." I thanked him. Hung up. Then I stood in the middle of my kitchen, breathing slow. She wasn't done. Not yet. And that was fine. Because neither was I. You want to see what happens when someone tries to ruin your life and fails. You give them a front row seat to what success looks like when it's built from pain. And you make sure they can never touch it again. That would be phase 3. Most people think revenge is about rage. But rage fades. If you're lucky, it burns out fast, leaves a crater in your chest, maybe some broken furniture, and then silence. But if you're really lucky, the rage doesn't burn. It simmers. It becomes strategy, focus, calculation. That's what I had now. Not bitterness, not spite, just clarity and time. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I was free. Legally, financially, emotionally. But not fully. Not yet. Because even though Allison had walked away with scraps, she hadn't walked away empty. She had something far more dangerous than money. She had a story. And stories are powerful, especially when told by someone who can cry on command. I started hearing it more often. People dropping hints that they'd heard things. A couple of my former friends from our couples group stopped replying to texts. One even blocked me on social media, which was wild considering I was the one who paid for their destination wedding gift last year. Allison was playing the long game. She couldn't touch my assets, so she was coming for my reputation, my network. She was painting herself as the tragic heroine abandoned by the cold-hearted businessman, the man who blindsided her, who planned her financial downfall behind her back. I knew her playbook. I'd lived with it for 7 years. But now I had my own. The first thing I did was gather information. Not dirt, not yet. Just perspective. I started reconnecting with people I hadn't talked to in years. Quiet conversations. A coffee here. A catch-up dinner there. Not with anyone close to Allison. She'd poisoned those wells, but with people adjacent. People on the periphery who'd always had a sense of what our dynamic was. One of them was Natalie. She used to be part of our extended friend group back when Allison and I hosted those awful monthly wine and board game nights. She was sharp, observant, and always polite, but a little distant from Allison. We hadn't spoken in over a year. I invited her out for lunch, no agenda, just to reconnect. But halfway through her salad, She looked up and said, "So, you know she's dating that guy now, right?" I blinked. "What guy?" "Some finance dude. Name's Bryce. Works at her dad's firm. He was at one of your parties once." I didn't remember him. "Is it serious?" Natalie gave a tight smile. "Well, she was dating him before the divorce was finalized. So, you tell me." I stared at her, trying to process. "She cheated?" She tilted her head. "She says it wasn't cheating. She says you were emotionally unavailable for years." There it was again. The story. The curated narrative. "Doesn't matter," I said. "She can date who she wants." Natalie watched me for a moment. "Jason, I'm going to be honest. People believed her at first. The crying, the victim act, it works. But lately she's slipping. She's saying too much. Inconsistent stories. She's bragging to people about how she won the divorce. It's rubbing people the wrong way." That got my attention. "She's losing control of the narrative?" Natalie nodded. "If you had something to say, your side, I think people might actually listen now." I didn't say anything right away, because I wasn't ready to tell my side. I was ready to show it. The next move came by accident. One afternoon, I walked into a small downtown art gallery that had just opened a few weeks prior. I was waiting to meet a client nearby, and I had 20 minutes to kill. I didn't expect anything special, but that's when I met Jonah. Jonah was the gallery owner, a soft-spoken guy in his late 20s with this quiet charisma that made you feel instantly at ease. We talked for a few minutes, and he asked what I did. When I told him about my manufacturing business, his eyes lit up. "You ever think about sponsoring local creatives?" he asked. "Like helping fund exhibits, getting your brand tied to culture?" It was a simple question, but it planted a massive seed. Allison had always mocked my work. "Brackets and bolts," she'd say. "So glamorous." She thought it was beneath her, that it lacked any sophistication or style. What if I turned that exact business into a brand? Not just function, identity, support for local builders, artists, creators. What if I reclaimed the story of who I was? Not just some boring guy with a company, but someone who used his resources to uplift others. That night, I didn't sleep. I was too busy outlining a new campaign. Within weeks, I partnered with Jonah to sponsor a community art event downtown. Free to the public, local artists, musicians, and food vendors. The event was called Steel and Soul, a subtle nod to the manufacturing roots and the creative future. It was a hit. People came in droves. I gave a short speech, nothing flashy. Just talked about building things that last, products, relationships, communities. It wasn't about Allison. It didn't have to be. But people noticed, especially the ones who had quietly believed her narrative. Suddenly, there I was, calm, composed, respected, generous. They couldn't reconcile that image with the cold-hearted man Allison had described. The whispers started to shift, and I wasn't done yet. A few weeks later, I hosted a private dinner. Just 10 people, carefully selected. Business leaders, creatives, city planners, nonprofit directors. We ate, talked, shared ideas. No hard pitch, just honest connection. By the end of the night, I had 3 new partnerships lined up, 2 with nonprofit mentorship programs for underprivileged youth, and 1 with a startup incubator for minority-owned small businesses. I didn't announce it on social media. I didn't post photos. I let the results speak. And quietly, slowly, Allison's version of the story began to unravel. People stopped mentioning her at events. A couple of our former friends started circling back. One even apologized, said they'd jumped to conclusions too quickly. It wasn't about winning them back. It was about letting the truth breathe. But the real opportunity came in the form of an email. It was from a woman named Susan, an event coordinator for a high-profile charity gala Allison's father's firm helped sponsor every year. It was one of those society events Allison used to obsess over. Who wore what? Who sat where? Which photos made it into the newsletter? Susan wrote, "We're impressed by your recent initiatives. We'd love for you to be a featured speaker at the upcoming gala. Would you be open to joining the event as a guest of honor?" I nearly laughed. Guest of honor? At her event? Oh, this was too perfect. I replied that I'd be honored to attend, but only on one condition, that I could speak. 5 minutes. Nothing major. Just a short talk on resilience, rebuilding, and the importance of community. Susan agreed. And just like that, the final piece clicked into place. I didn't care about humiliating Allison. I didn't need to expose her publicly. But being seen, not as the man she tried to paint me as, but as the man I actually was, That was the one thing she couldn't control. Her stories couldn't stand against reality. She was about to sit in that ballroom, next to her new finance boyfriend, sipping overpriced champagne, thinking she'd escaped the wreckage clean. And then the lights would dim, the spotlight would shift, and I'd walk onto the stage, not to attack her, not to get even, but to make sure she saw, with absolute clarity, that I had survived her storm and built a castle from the debris. But there was still one last thing to do before that night. A private message to someone I hadn't contacted in months. I opened my phone and typed, "Hey, I know things have been messy, and I haven't reached out in a while, but there's something happening soon I think you should be part of. A night that's about rebuilding. You always believed in that. Hope to see you there." The message was to Evelyn, because some victories are sweeter when they're shared. And I wanted someone next to me who saw me before the storm, before the betrayal, the lies, the heartbreak. Someone who remembered the real me. Someone who saw the man rising from the ashes. Because the gala? That wasn't the end. That was just the curtain lift. The gala was held at the Harborview Hotel, the kind of place with marble floors so polished they looked wet and valet attendants who smiled like they knew all your secrets. 1,000 soft lights floated over round tables dressed in white and gold, with crystal centerpieces and tiny, calligraphed name cards no one could actually read in the dim glow. It was the kind of event Allison used to talk about like it was the pinnacle of success. "This," she once told me, twirling in front of a mirror in a silver dress, "is where people arrive." Now it was my name on the program, not hers. I arrived fashionably late, not out of arrogance, but because I didn't want to linger. I wanted to arrive. And when I walked in, heads turned. I wore a sharp navy suit, custom fitted the week prior. No tie, clean shave, quiet confidence. Evelyn stood beside me, elegant in a deep green dress that made her look like she belonged on the cover of something expensive. She wasn't my date. Technically, she didn't need a label. She was support, strength. She was calm and graceful, and more importantly, real. Allison was already there. I saw her before she saw me, seated 3 tables from the stage, next to a tall, square-jawed man I assumed was Bryce. Her new finance guy. He looked like a walking LinkedIn profile. Confident, tan, too much teeth. She wore a strapless black gown with an open back, the kind she always said was elegant with just enough danger. Her posture shifted the second she spotted me. One hand went to her hair. The other gripped the stem of her champagne, glass a little tighter. She nudged Bryce. He looked, blinked. I nodded in their direction. Neither smiled. Perfect. The speeches began around 8. Local politicians, business leaders, influencers who couldn't string a sentence together without glancing at a teleprompter. People clapped, smiled politely, checked their phones under the tablecloth. Then the MC walked to the mic, beaming. "And now," she said, "it's my honor to welcome someone who's shown this city what it means to rebuild after loss, to rise after chaos, and to give back with quiet strength. Please welcome Jason Hale." The applause was warm, not thunderous, but respectful. I walked to the stage, steady and unrushed. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. The lights were bright, but not blinding. I stood at the podium, adjusted the mic, and scanned the room. My eyes paused, just briefly, on Allison. She stared straight at me, unreadable. Good. Let her wonder. "Thank you," I began. I wasn't expecting this honor. And if you'd asked me a year ago whether I'd be standing here tonight, I would have said no. Not because I didn't want to be, but because a year ago, my life looked very different. The room got quieter. I was married, settled, focused on maintaining the life I'd built. I thought success meant stability. I thought love meant endurance. I believed, with everything in me, that if you gave people your best, they'd give you their best back. I paused, just long enough. But sometimes, they don't. Allison shifted in her seat. Bryce leaned in slightly, whispering something. She didn't respond. Sometimes, they take what you give. They smile while doing it. And then they leave. People were still, listening now. And when that happens, you have 2 choices. You can fall apart, drown in bitterness, in blame, in shame. Or, you can take a breath, look around, and say, "Okay, what's next?" I let that land. I chose what's next. I took the pain, the betrayal, the loneliness, and I turned it into something stronger. Not louder, just stronger. I didn't scream into the void. I didn't burn everything down. I built something better. A beat of silence. Then I looked out at the crowd. I rebuilt my company. I rebuilt my name. I rebuilt me. And I started giving back. Not because I wanted applause, but because I finally understood what it meant to create something that can't be taken. I glanced at Evelyn. She smiled, small but proud. I returned it. And that's the message I want to leave you with tonight. Your worth isn't measured by what people say about you. It's measured by what you do, quietly, consistently, even when no one's watching. Especially when they're not. I finished simply. Thank you. Applause erupted. Louder this time. Not for a spectacle. For a man who had survived and didn't need to scream about it. I stepped down from the stage. Hands clapped my back. People murmured praise. The mayor's assistant asked to schedule coffee. A reporter handed me her card. Someone else asked about sponsorships. And then I felt her behind me. Allison. Her voice. The same soft edge I remembered. The tone she used when she wanted something. I turned slowly. She looked poised, but I could see the cracks. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The slight tremble in her hand. Jason, she said. That was quite a speech. Thanks. She waited. Then, can we talk? Just for a second. Evelyn appeared at my side, but I gently touched her arm. It's okay. We stepped to the side, away from the crowd, near a marble column that shielded us. I didn't know you were speaking tonight, Allison said. Surprise. She forced a laugh. You've changed. No, I said. I just stopped hiding who I was. Her lips parted, then closed. She looked at me like she was trying to recognize me, like I was a puzzle missing pieces she used to own. I never meant for things to get so messy, she said quietly. I was hurt. I was confused. I didn't know how to leave without losing everything. You didn't lose everything, I said. You just lost access. She flinched, just slightly. I didn't press it. I see you brought Bryce, I added, glancing past her. She didn't react. I hope he's good to you, I said. I really do. Jason, she started. But I held up a hand. I'm not angry anymore, Allison. I was. For a long time. But now, I'm just grateful. Her brow furrowed. Grateful? I nodded. If you hadn't betrayed me, I'd still be stuck in that version of myself you never respected. You didn't just leave me. You freed me. She looked like she wanted to speak. But no words came. And that silence? That was the real victory. Because Allison wasn't used to being speechless. She wasn't used to not being able to spin, to twist, to control the outcome. And now, she had nothing left to twist. I should get back, I said. Enjoy your night. I turned and walked away. She didn't follow. She never would again. The rest of the evening was a blur of conversation, laughter, opportunity. But it wasn't about image. It wasn't even about revenge anymore. It was about peace. Revenge, when done right, isn't about destruction. It's about demonstration. Of who you've become. Of what they lost. Of how they'll never reach you again. That night, as Evelyn and I walked out of the harbor view under a sky full of stars, she slipped her hand into mine. Do you feel better? She asked softly. I thought about it. About the betrayal. The pain. The plan. The execution. Then I looked up at the city skyline. Bold. Silent. Unshakable. I smiled. Yeah, I said. I feel free. And I meant it. Because when someone tries to ruin your life and fails, you don't just move on. You rise. And you make sure they see it from below.